the Arab immigrant community in the U.S., conversations about mental health are still surrounded by stigma, misunderstanding, or silence. Yet behind closed doors, families are navigating anxiety, generational conflict, trauma, and the challenge of balancing two worlds and expressing two identities on a daily basis. Today's guest, Totah, is a family therapist based in Southern California who works directly with Arab immigrant families. She helps parents, children, and couples understand mental health in a culturally sensitive way, bridging tradition, resilience, faith, emotional well-being, and modern therapeutic practices. I have been waiting for decades to have this conversation with a professional such as Tiff because professionals like her, mental health conversation with Arab immigrant communities are revolving. And what was once whispered in private is slowly becoming something we can speak about openly. And to be honest with you, it is such a liberating feeling. And we are excited to explore what it really looks like when healing begins inside Arab families in the U.S. Welcome back to another episode of Chatting with Slava the Jordanian. I'm your host, STJ. And let me start with introducing Tiff through her bio. So she is a marriage and family therapist specializing in Middle Eastern mental health with over 20 years of experience in the counseling field. She holds 2 master's degrees, one in counseling and one in human relations, bringing both clinical depth and a strong understanding of interpersonal dynamics for her work. She supports individuals, couples, and families navigating identity, relationships, and intergenerational patterns within Arab communities. Her approach bridges cultural understanding with emotional healing, creating spaces where clients feel seen, grounded, and empowered. Beyond the therapy room, Tiffany has built an engaged online community centered on internal Arab healing, cultural dialogue, and personal growth. Through her social media platforms, she shares reflections and insights that challenge stigma and encourage deeper self-awareness with the Arab diaspora. Her focus is direct, helping people reconnect with themselves, strengthen their relationships, and contribute to a more conscious and emotionally aware community. Wow, I'm covered with goosebumps. Thank you so much for coming on, and I can't wait for us just to dive into this. So since our platform is all about storytelling, let's start with you sharing the story that inspired you to work specifically with Arab families.
Well, thank you so much for having me be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my story. I grew up first generation Palestinian American in San Francisco, California, and I struggled throughout my life with my Arab identity and living in the United States, particularly in San Francisco. And so growing up in the 70s, a lot of our parents and grandparents immigrated in the 40s, 50s, 60s. And so growing up in the 70s, we had a very close-knit community. We were not allowed to interact with anybody outside of our cousins, our community. And so as I grew up and as I was very curious, that environment really suffocated me in many ways. And I struggled so much with wanting this sense of belonging in my community, but yet this other part of me that wanted to explore and experience things and learn different things or meet different people. And that created a clash with my family, and I rebelled a lot. And so with that said, I suffered and they suffered. Everybody was suffering as a result of this inability to bridge the gap of communication. So clearly at the time, mental health was not a thing ever. We never talked about those things, that I didn't have the tools to navigate honoring our culture and the need for my own independence and autonomy. So when I became a marriage and family therapist, I knew I wanted to be able to provide service to our community, to the younger generation, for them to perhaps learn, or for them to learn or not make the same mistakes I did at a minimum, and to be able to give them a space to talk about it, for our elders to give them a space to talk about everything that they have gone through. And as we know, our communities are very, very complex, and being of service in that way was profoundly important to me when I entered this field, because there was nothing out there for us. Zero, nothing. So I wanted to be that for our communities in the best way, in the most meaningful way that I can.
That is amazing. I just want to remind the audience, our viewers and our listeners, that, you know, you're coming on here. You're part of our special edition of Chatting with Slava the Jordanian, which is Discovering Palestinian Intellect. So this episode is you know, it's going to be so inspiring and so impactful, not because showing that we are more than 10 living refugees or children of diaspora, that, you know, we're all, you know, scared and hiding and not moving forward. We are intellectuals that can think independently and have some kind of regency over our lives and what we want to do with our lives. Because I'm not sure if I mentioned to you, there was an article that was published by the Columbia Press blog in, I think, August 2023, that why Palestinians are the world's most educated refugees. So that said, right, they are so well educated, or the world's most educated refugees, but also at the same time as Arabs, the stigma of talking about mental health, that I couldn't understand. My dad has a PhD and my mom has a master's. You know, all of us are just like, we eat, drink, education. And that's what, you know, my dad always used to tell me, your education is your ticket to the party. If you don't have education, people won't want to hear your opinion. They don't consider you as somebody that is important to express yourself to make the world a better place. But also, there's a lot of contradiction. I mean, if science tells you that the well-being and mental health is a science, that we need to address it in order for us. Can you imagine if we address mental health, how much further we would have achieved, you know, and hopefully people like you in the world will help the younger generation heal, and also to navigate through that, like I said, the culturally sensitive you know, stigma about mental health. But why is it, in your opinion, why is it so hard to speak openly and discuss mental health within the Arab household?
I really appreciate you saying that and giving context to that. Well, we know that it's shaped by one of the main reasons I see is the idea of honor and reputation, that we come from a culture that's a collective culture, a close culture, that the individual represents the family. And so when you have a family member that's struggling with mental health, the family may see it as reflecting poorly upon them, their strength, their upbringing, their faith. And so then it becomes privacy, becomes protection. Don't air out our problems outside. Yet what is underneath that is that fear of social judgment. Not that the families don't care. They're very worried, but their fear of social judgment supersedes going out and getting some help. And so let's just not talk about it. Let's bury it, hoping that it will go away. Typically, it doesn't. It only gets worse. And I always let Arab families know, address it sooner than later, but we could discuss that a little later. I think another reason that many of our parents and grandparents lived through, as many of you already know, war, displacement, economic hardship. Even if the immigration was chosen and they wanted to come to, whether it's the U.S. or anywhere else, that a lot of times it came from survival-based parenting models. And so it was sort of like their mindset was just existing. and this idea of feeling of what they left behind, what occurred, what happened to them is too much. Emotional expression for a lot of our parents and grandparents is a luxury that they couldn't afford when they're trying to survive in whether it's in their own home countries or in the diaspora. And so when the younger generations are saying, okay, I'm nervous, I'm sad, I'm feeling that, to the parents and grandparents, it may sound like fragility to them. And what I'm hoping we can impart on, yes, you were in survival. Your children are not, because you did such a great job. Your children aren't in as much survival. And so we have to recognize the baselines of distress are different. And I think there's a few more, there's still so much stigma, because even in our own respective countries, because I've talked to my father about this, Allah yarhamu, but I, talked to my father about this, where therapy was associated with the lejnoon, the therapeutic mental health services were in many regions were tied to severe psychiatric cases, that it wasn't a common thing to engage in for thriving, because everyone was surviving, that it was this idea of thriving. And so we need to move away from therapy is only for crazy people, and that something is seriously wrong with you. It just may be you want a space to talk about all the things that are happening, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's quite healthy to want to be able to process things. And I think the other big thing I see as far as why Arab households don't talk about mental health is religious misinterpretations. Now, let me be clear. It is not religion itself at all. Faith can be a wonderful coping tool. However, sometimes it's oversimplified. I hear from a lot of clients that my parents would tell me, if I just pray more, I'll be fine, which then it reinforces the shame. I have weak faith, or God, I am not in God's favor. And so then it reinforces the shame that somehow I'm doing something wrong through the eyes of religion, when you have someone struggling with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or neurodivergence or drug and alcohol addiction, that it's so much more than prayer, that you need a lot more support. And can we use, so I think faith also, religious misinterpretation is a big one. Those are generally the biggest things I see. I think the only other one that I see is that the Arabic language, as we know, is so rich and beautiful, and just, we have one word can mean like 6 things, right? Yet we lack language for emotions. Or if it's there, so, well, I would talk to my clients, because I'm not fluent fil Arabi, right? And I'll ask them, well, what's this word fil Arabi? They're like, we don't have a word for it. And I thought, okay, so in many Arab households, it could just be that we don't have the emotional vocabulary. Not that they don't understand it or don't know it, but we just don't, it's not in our everyday discourse that we're talking about emotional language. And so what do we say? If we can't name it, you can't process it. So it's not anyone's fault. It's just, how can we improve upon our culture by using the richness of our language to include more emotional language?
After you displace yourself, whether through migration or immigration, and then when the dust settles, then everything just surfaces up and you're like, what is this? Because as immigrant, I came here in 1988. So, my dad being a Palestinian, going from Palestine, Jordan, from Jordan being Saudi Arabia. I was born in Saudi Arabia, then coming to the United States. There's a lot of displacement, and that you carry that with you as like you need to clean house. But because through the displacement process, through the immigration journey, you don't have time to stop and say, and that's nobody's fault but ourselves. You don't have time because you have sacrificed so much. It's not, you have to set up your priority. What's more important for me to find a job, feed my family, get education, and have a life? Because I left everybody that I know and everything I love behind to sit down and brew out my emotions, so that's why we never pick up the skill to name it, feel it, then heal it. Right. We don't have that skill. So when we start feeling so weird, you're like, okay. And in Majaneen, it's a Moristan, comes from thanks to the Ottoman Empire that now even I think Al-Fatimiyin, they called them Moristan, which was the mobile hospitals. They were, created to go help the people that could not have the resources for medical aid. And then I think during the Ottoman Empire turned into the, the psychiatric hospital. So my dad used to yell at us to say that it's like, Dad, something's going on. It's like, we get really anxious, the whole anxiety and panic attack. Is like, do you want me to register you, send you to the Moristan? That was something that it was the boogeyman kind of thing. It's like, no, I'll be better. That was always like, stop acting that way. Otherwise you're going to end up there. But because he did not know, or that's the best he could do, because, you transfer that power to that generation. I'm transferring that tool. This is the best I know. I got nothing except for that. And that's the best that I can teach you in order for you to adapt. Then you move to the Western world, and the Western world identifies your right to feel that way, but you don't know how to process it. You don't have a relationship with it, because as an immigrant, quitting is not an option. Failure is not an option. Making mistakes are not an option. If you make mistakes, you better learn from them. You better not repeat your mistakes. Don't master your mistakes. And that's probably, you see it even within, like you mentioned, within your family or all the Arab families out there. But now the new generations, because of social media and because how the whole world is connected to the point that the whole world feel like a very small world, very well connected, they are getting into the concept of, I have the right to feel that way. I have the right to reach out to a therapist. I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, in schools and universities, psychology and philosophy was forbidden to be taught. You cannot get a degree in philosophy or psychology, only sociology as a liberal art field. But now, of course, have changed. But that was in the 70s and the 80s, and changed in the 90s after the Gulf War. So if nobody is educated in psychology, who you turn to? And the last point I want to make that you actually tapped into is when we used to, you're absolutely right, when we used to tell my parents, like, I'm very anxious about the school activity or the exam, or we're even when we go to Umrah to Mecca, it's like, I'm not sure if I can do it right. We're very anxious about it. We don't sleep all night about it. My mom will say, go eat, go sleep, have a nap, go pray. And then when you say, no, I need to talk to somebody professional, they get really offended by it. It's the offense that a human being can help you more than the divine can help you. You need to reach out to Allah and pray, and He's gonna yilhimik, basically. He's gonna bring upon you some kind of a peace and calmness so you can get over that anxious moment or that panicky moment. So that kind of, you're right, religion, and that's not Islam. That's, I think, more the traditional. Remember, you have to remember that Islam has its own principle and fundamental basis, but the tribal tradition of Arabs, right, it just took Islam and dressed it up into, this is the tradition, this is the custom, this is what we do, this is how we do it. Because Kazakhs, for example, if you go up in Eastern Europe, the Muslims in Eastern Europe, they're a little bit different than the Arab, right, Muslims. So, and that's the case with every single religion, just their customs are a little bit different. So their mindset is a little bit different. And I hope that makes sense, but you can come in.
It makes total sense. And I was just thinking, yeah, and you very much see that also in Christian communities as well, that it's not even a religious, it's a cultural thing in how we are, how we're looking at therapy or looking at getting help, from again, an oversimplified, way. That how do we know that, I'll tell clients, maybe you were drawn to a particular podcast or looking at something on social media, or you met somebody that would be able to, how do we know that's not from God? And so we need to really, and I don't engage in these types of religious, debates, but it's to say, can we kind of open our expansion around how the divine speaks to us, that maybe it speaks to us in so many different ways? And can we be open as a culture to recognize that there's not just one tariq, that there's many ways in which we can heal? And
yeah, because praying is simply just a meditation, right? So praying, and I believe, probably, I don't know if it's controversial, but I believe that God is not sitting up there counting how many times Slava is praying, how many times Tiff is praying. He's God, right? So the recommendation to do so, it's recommended for your own as a human being. That's one of the ways that you can calm yourself and comfort yourself. So it's a way of meditation. You're meditating, like in Islam, you're praying five times a day, in private or in public. That's for your own good. And that's what religion is all about. Like, if you need help, seek help by having that 3-5 minutes of quiet down, disconnect yourself from reality to just recharge and give yourself a break. And then you can go back to the challenges of reality. Now, I agree with you 100%, but it's amazing how the Arab a family, household mentality, mindset, really, it's so strong in that holding on to those ties, and you transfer that power to generation over generation over generation. I mean, I went to Egypt for the first time in 2024, and these are young. Those are Z-gens. But they are very solid in the tradition, the Arab tradition, which part of it is Islam too, because our Arab tradition has influence of the Ottoman Empire. You have Fatimid, Mamalik, you have Iraq, Syria, Levantine, Africa. Also, on top of it, you have the Islamic tradition that unites all of us. That's what we have so much in common. Same thing with the Egyptian Orthodox, right? They are Egyptians. They said, no, we're Egyptian first and foremost. But yeah, we are Orthodox, but they live together with the Muslim community, but they have this same Egyptian culture, and they honor the ancient Egyptian history and legacy. But it's just amazing that their household, they look the same and they think the same, except for, one household has the Quran, the other one has the cross. You know what I'm saying? But they speak the same language. They have the same jokes, they have the same phrases, but when it comes to it at the end of the day, probably they think exactly the same. So I've seen my husband's nieces and nephews, which are, a mix of Muslim and Orthodox Egyptian. They're exactly the same, except when it comes to, one is fasting for Ramadan, the other one's not fasting. One celebrates Easter, the one that doesn't celebrate Easter. But it's amazing how, like I said, the Arab culture, the mindset of the Arab culture, and that comes from the tribal mindset, what I call the tribal, the traditional tribal connection that keeps the Arabs together with understanding that duty is very important. Principle is very important. Responsibility is very important, and then when we don't play upon all these things, we feel like the feelings are betrayal, dishonesty, letting go, and it's as simple as trying to change your belief system as an immigrant. When you assimilate in the new world or the Western world, the guilt that you feel like I am dropping or I'm letting go of some of the belief system that my ancestry survived on. Now, who am I to change some of these values but they don't serve me anymore here? You know what I'm saying? If I'm over there, maybe, but it's like almost upgrading your toolbox. I hope that makes sense.
And I love that you said the word upgrade, because that's how we approach the work. We're not trying to negate our histories. We're just saying we're going to do an upgrade of all of the things we were taught, all our ancestral knowledge, everything that comes with it. And we're just going to gently, slowly, compassionately upgrade it to today's global times, where we are all connected in ways we never thought possible. Access to information is instantaneous, and that can feel so profoundly threatening. And yet what I'm trying to help bridge that gap with our elders is to say, the young generation, I have yet to meet one young person clinically, or young adult, or even adult for that matter, that does not want to be a part of our incredible culture, or be a part of the family and be a part of this belonging. Yet because there's some rigidity around healing, or ways of healing, that the person at some point feels like they need to disconnect in order to find themselves. And I'm trying to explain to the older generation, to say, in them trying to find themselves and you giving them a space to feel their feelings, even if it doesn't make sense to you, to be open to allowing them to find their own healing path, that they wouldn't want to leave you, that they're going to want, but self-preservation can be very, very important. It doesn't mean they want to leave the culture. And I think that's what we come from, a fear-based culture for lots of reasons. And so what I'm trying to help impart is that therapy is about self-awareness, not separation, that it's learning how your mind works, how your emotions work, the patterns of behavior. And if we want more peace in our homes, it's about each person learning about themselves, in turn having understanding of the other person. And then from there, we build more peace in our families. And so what we're doing, and you said that, what's no longer serving is a lot of these coping mechanisms that worked really well for our families. I mean, my goodness, they were incredibly strong, resilient, just incredible people that accomplished, even in the face of the utmost of adversities, they succeeded, and they succeeded well. And so we're going to upgrade by saying, great job, you guys exceeded. Now we're going to boost up our emotional capacity.
No, I agree with you, because it brings me to the point of identity. You know, as an immigrant, you know, what's our identity, right? Our values, our tradition, the way we talk to each other, our body language, the way how we make our food, the way how we set up our homes, the music and all that. But when you displace yourself, there is always the threat of losing that part of identity. And as an immigrant, when you decide to leave your home world, you know for sure is like, you know, make sure you understand that you're going to leave part of your identity behind. It's never going to be the same. And that's what they teach us before we actually step out of that, you know, that door, when you just take off and go to another world. So identity with Arabs, it's huge because of the historical, geopolitical conflicts that the Arab world have seen, that, you know, we can't afford to lose anymore. That's what my parents used to tell me. It's like, we can't afford losing more identity. We're trying to preserve as much as possible by transferring the power to you guys to help us preserve it. Then, you know, and continue that legacy when we are gone. That's part of your job. And that puts a lot of pressure on us. But, you know, by saying, but I want a better life for myself. Like that's a lot of pressure on me. And it's part of, like I said, the duty towards your legacy, your heritage, and duty towards yourself. And that's when both both ends, they start struggling when you get older, becomes a young adult or even adult or middle-aged adult, that, okay, this is not serving me anymore, but hold on a second, that's part of my identity. That's what kept me going. That's what helped me survive the immigration journey. And here I am. I'm willing to abandon that. That's just, I'm trying to go over, through the psychology to our viewers, that's what goes through our heads as an immigrant, leaving everything behind. Like, my parents are already sacrificed for me to end up having a better life, but now I am betraying that by dropping some of the values that I used to have to help me to get to this point, to make my own value. Like, how selfish am I? You know what I'm saying? Like, I have no right to make my own values. I have the right to honor the traditional values. My duty is to make sure that those values are still intact and transfer, like I said, the power to the new generation. Don't forget, my dad used to tell me, doesn't matter where you are, how big you are, how rich you are, don't ever forget where you come from, which is fine. But again, when you go through the process, like you said, trying to upgrade those values, it's almost like the foundation is the same. It's very traditional and it's beautiful, but we're building a little bit of a modern building on top of it that can actually be practical for the new world. It's not practical just to have all these, traditions. So a huge part of it is the identity crisis, the turmoil that you go through. It's like, okay, who am I? I'm creating my own identity, but I feel really bad. It's the guilt that comes with it, being from an Arab, an Arab offspring or culture.
Mm-hmm. And I always let my clients know both can be true. Can we hold both truths? Yet we come from a pretty dichotomous culture. It's all or nothing. And so can we hold the space for both, that we can upgrade and honor? And we can do that. I've seen that happen. And one thing that by avoiding conversations around emotional health and well-being, we're not eliminating our problems. We're just transferring them from generation to generation. So if we don't upgrade, we're going to lose more of ourselves. And that's what I see with the younger generation. In my experience, is in not having these conversations, the younger generation is saying, I don't want this culture. I don't want this identity. I'm rejecting it. And I say, okay, slow down. I hear you. Been there, done that. Now slow down. Let's take a look at how we can blend the two, because both can be true at the same time.
Yeah, the emotional struggle is, like I said, when I went to Egypt after 38 years here in the United States, the last time I was in the Middle East was after the Gulf War, I think 1991, visiting my parents. I felt I'm too American to be an Arab.
Yes.
And when I'm here, I feel I'm too Arab to be an American. Now, the beauty about immigrants is you have the multicultural adaptability, multicultural competency, because you are able to feel and be empathetic and accepting and relate to other cultures or other societies, whether it's in here, the Asian society, the community, the Hispanic community around us, the Indian, the Pakistani community. We know, I get it. I get the struggle. We know, and we get together and we can relate and we share stories. But that doesn't change the fact that the duality of culture, the duality of identity, sometimes if you're not treating it or you're not managing it in a very healthy way, it could be something that takes a toll on your mental health and well-being. And like you said, the rejection, it's either black and white. Like when I started seeing my life coach, I was struggling and I said, okay, postmenopausal, I'm middle age. I'm like, okay, I achieved everything I'm supposed to achieve. Now what? Like, I feel like I'm in limbo. She goes, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I'm not American enough to be here. I'm not Arab enough to be here because I'm in, I have both worlds, mindset wise, emotional, principle wise. I want to be both. She goes, why are you driving yourself crazy trying to be one or the other? Why can't you be both? Why can't you say, I'm an Arab and I'm American? And just by replacing the and or by the end, that was a light bulb. That was like, like my emotions was like, okay, I need to calm down. I was so anxious about it. And you can tell I'm so anxious just talking about it. And I've been, with that life coach over 2 years. But, it's amazing. Like you said, if you have to name it, to feel it and to heal it. And that's exactly the process that I recommend going through. And that's why, thank God for people like you in this world to help those folks going through it and going through that emotional struggle.
One thing, thank you for sharing that. One of the things that I've seen in not holding the space for both is, and in our emotional suppression and not talking about it, what we're seeing is physical symptoms. How it manifests when you're code switching American, right? You're code switching here, you're code switching with your family, you're code switching at work. We can't be too, even as a Palestinian, we, at that time in the 70s, like we were not allowed to even say we're Palestinian. Like that was, that would put us at significant risk. I mean, now it's great. I can't believe where we've come so far in many, many ways. That suppression of who we are as Arab here. And then many times we want to be this autonomous who we are with our families. And so it headaches, gut issues, fatigue. I see that a lot, that there are significant consequences to our relationships, our intimate partnerships, in needing to control, or sometimes we create emotional distance or conflict because of that conflict within ourselves or that inability to express ourselves. And that definitely, I've seen this, it moves into the next generation. And I'm saying, can we stop the silence, that it's not being neutral or not dishonoring? The silence is not honoring, that it's transmitting, it's not having us be in the fullness of our culture, that it really is limiting us by not talking about it in many, many ways.
But still, they just, they have they're a lot more at ease, and they have this easiness about asking about me. Before, nobody's like, okay, just, they see me, they want to walk the other way. So I can't imagine in the 70s. But I guess my question is, when you sit with families, I just want to really go through, what does it look like when you are trying to resolve that, when the conflict arises between the parents and the children? Do you sit with the whole family together, or do you start with the younger generation first and then you pull the parents in? So how do you help them understand? Yeah, there's a cultural gap. There is the mindset gap about what you are going through.
Mm-hmm. Normally in my practice, it starts with the individual coming in, whether they find me on social media or a referral from a cousin or a friend, and they come in just to wrap their minds around what's happening for them. And I typically don't recommend that they bring their families in until we can get them shored up a little bit more, to say, okay, let's create a foundation for you, a tethering for you, a grounding for you before we bring, usually it's mom Typically, the moms are more open. So the mom will come in wanting to understand her child, even though they're a grown adult, wanting to be open. There's always, and I get emotional because our mothers, they struggle so much on so many levels. And then when their willingness to come in and to say, I don't understand this, they literally do not understand, but their openness to wanting to understand, no matter how hard it is, even if it triggers their own pain that they've suppressed since they were children, the tremendous amount of loss, because in their child's that chronic like that tension between the two worlds, that it may open up their parents in a way that I always have to remind my clients, in your healing, it's a mirror to your parents' pain. And they may not be ready in this lifetime for reasons none of us can fathom. And so we cannot force anyone to open up about the trauma. And so this is where I talk to the younger generation to say, yes, I hear you. You want to be seen. You want to be heard. You want them to affirm what you're going through. And you need to recognize that your healing is going to mirror back to them everything they've suppressed since a very young age, and the amount of losses that they've experienced. Again, and I validate that for the parent. Sometimes we will bring in, so when it comes to the family work, usually it's one family member that's open, whether it's a sister or a brother, the whole family. Not in my practice, that has not happened. And that's what we're moving towards, that we can do more family. And again, we have to do it gently and in stages, that we can't bust open the door of this. That's what I'm trying to okay, yes, you're driving it up, but Hadu, slow down. Like the families are very, very, they've been suppressed for so long that we don't want to open them up too much, because that can put them at risk. And that's not what we're doing here.
Now, how does that translate? Have you seen, so when you have the client or the patient coming in, and it's funny that you said mom, because in at least in my community back home, moms are always the liaison, right? It's kind of the negotiator. You know, this is what's going on with my kid. Okay, let me go talk to your dad. You know, and the same thing as simple as the proposal for marriage. You know, you talk to the mom first, and the mom goes to the dad, and then the dad says yes, and the mom, she negotiates, she goes back and forth. So that's very smart protocol or approach, because you will get the best dialogue with the mom, because moms are very sympathetic, because part of them, they have the pride of their tradition and their family, and they want to keep like I said, the traditional, tribal connection, but also at the same time, he's still Danaya, right? He's my baby, or she's my baby, and I want to help them, and I don't want them to suffer. So they are the perfect liaison. But after that, like, how successful is that when you are meeting with, the patient and then a family member? Does it have a very effective ripple effect through the family? Do you hear that the whole family just started? And I agree with you. I think you cannot just go charging in. It's just like going to a tribe that's been eating, meat and rice, and you go in there, it's like, no, meat and rice is bad for you because meat has a lot of cholesterol. You need to eat avocado toast. It's not going to work, right? It really doesn't. It's a better fat. It's, but they're going to look at you, it's like, are you nuts? Like, we've been eating rice and meat for generations. I don't want to change. So you can't really force that concept, and you want it to be passively, integrated into the culture of the household too, because it's not only the community. So do you see that ripple effect? How effective is that?
I do. And it takes I always let my clients know we need to manage expectations, that it takes a very, very, very long time to get to those places of mutual understanding and growth and awareness, and that this is not an overnight here's a couple tools, or here's a TikTok, or here's a video. Oh, khalas, okay, we're good. I always let them know think of it as like an unfoldment. We need to continually use discernment. And yes, I have seen healing. And when you do see that healing, to speak to what you said earlier, just around like, look how much we're able to accomplish. And then when you can give the tools and give the space, it's the most transformative, incredible things in my professional life, that to see that happen. And when it does, and really, I have to give a lot of our families credit, depending on how open they are. When they are open and willing to learn and willing to kind of explore these things, my goodness, it doesn't take that much time. It really doesn't. I mean, not as much time as I've seen in other clinical populations that, I always say, I always let my out-of clients know, when we have an openness to healing, like, look how much we can accomplish under duress. Imagine what we can accomplish in times where we can really heal one another, help heal one another. So yeah, I've seen it when it's open. When it's not open, I do need to acknowledge there's a tremendous amount of loss. And that's a whole other topic around when the family is not open, or when someone chooses to live an autonomous life. The rejection and the abandonment and the absolute pain of, it's like a tree being uprooted, and to find your grounding again can take a long, long time when the family is not open to healing. I agree with you 100%, because it comes from the concept. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. Is, it's okay for you to sacrifice for the greater good of the collective. And the collective is the family. So show us how much sacrifice you can do for us to find your value in that collective, in the family. Your value goes really up rank, really, really quick when the family sees you sacrificing for them. It's like, okay, you're like mujahid, so you going through this battling through the emotion, battling through the anxiety, battling through the trauma, but let's see how you can stand on strong. But unfortunately, that's a price. Some of them, like you said, some of the families, that they will not open, they will not tolerate that, they will not accept it. And you have to trust the process, though, and hopefully somebody like you that would teach him the science behind that, the naming it, feeling it, and healing it, to help their children be in a better place. Because the last thing you want, me, if I don't have kids, but if I was a parent, and a very conservative era parents, like, okay, do I accept for my child to have treatment, or I rather have my child, seek other routes, like numbing that feeling with, like, pharma, with the chemicals, with, what if that child has a chemical imbalance? You don't know. It could be a chemical imbalance that causes, schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or what have you. So but unfortunately, it is the Arab culture, but also every household, I think, in any of the Arab community, have their own culture within the culture, that what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And I can't imagine trying to sift through all that, trying to figure out, like, okay, how am I going to approach this? Now, one of the last thing that I want to address, the trauma of displacement. How common is that? Multi-generational. Now, I'm just first generation American immigrant, but even for just the first generation American or second generation American, is it getting better, or do you feel like also it gets transferred to the next generation, and it is as impactful as if you were like a newcomer to the United States? So that's an interesting question that I've been mulling over for, like, is it getting better? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it's easier because we are constantly, just when we think, I was telling a colleague the other day, just when I think we're moving a couple steps ahead, okay, there's another war, there's another issue, there's something, as soon as we feel like we're maybe making some inroads or strides, the world decides they want to come into the Middle East again and upheaval, which creates, it's almost like there's this, and pun intended, this bombardment. And so clinically, what I was telling my colleagues when they're working with people from our cultural context to say, there's no rest for the weary. And so to answer your question, I don't know, because we are constantly facing these external stressors that even when we do take steps to not pass down the displacement trauma, that another trauma occurs. And then, so you're asking me at a point in time, if we had this conversation 3 months ago or 4 months ago, I probably would have had a different answer, to be honest with you. I would have said, yo, it's getting better. It's getting a little bit easier. Now I'm like, I don't know if it is. And what do we do with that? And how do we help the generations overcome the fear and the stigma when we're constantly being faced with being in this survival, watching our families, the constant worry, the checking of the did their village get bombed? Did something happen? And then we want to thrive in a place of survival. It's profoundly difficult to do that when we're,
I feel no, I agree with you 100%. Coming from an immigrant that, I mean, if you can imagine, like the first memory of any conflict is watching the news of Sabra and Shatila, the massacre of Sabra and Shatila. Sabra and Shatila refugee in, I think, 1974. So I was like 5. And I literally went to ask my dad something, and it was black and white. He was watching the news, and I saw the gruesome, like, live footage of what's happening in that refugee camp. And I just ran out of the room. He called me, right? And I tell the story all the time. He goes, where do you think you're going? And I said, Dad, why are you watching this stuff? He goes, this is happening right now to our people. So he pulled me. I was 5. I was born in 69. So that was 74, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And he made me sit down and watch that. He goes, I want you to watch this because I want you to never forget what you're seeing. So I watched that. I watched the, of course, the conflict in Palestine, in the conflict in the Middle East, the Iran-Iraq war, the civil war in Lebanon, and then the Gulf War. So I agree with you. I feel like there's, when my patient, God forbid, that they have this, acute shock of cancer diagnosis, and then they're fine. They went through treatment, now in remission, and 5 years later, the cancer is coming back. It's like, we're not getting a break. So, I agree with you. I think the answer to the question especially from my end, being the trauma, whether we like it or not, one part somewhere in our body or in our emotional or in our psyche has been scarred or traumatized. And that transfer of trauma, even the generation, like first generation American, second generation American, young American Palestinian or American Arabs that not actually living it, they are witnessing some of it, and they are reflecting on what their parents and their grandparents. So it's a cumulative effect. Do you know what I'm saying? It becomes part of our psyche, part of our blueprint that we cannot escape from. And that's part of the trauma, not only, even if you're not seeing it, even if you're not living it, even if you were not had to displace yourself from it, right? And just get away from it, you are actually being traumatized by sayings like, why is this keeps happening to us? And then you look inwards and say, what is it that is so wrong about me that we deserve this? What is it so wrong about us that we actually deserve this? And that's, you go down the rabbit hole of the doubt. It's like, identity doubt, ethnic doubt. What is it about us that people just don't wish us to be living in peace and just move on?
So part of Community for International Arab, my online community, our tagline is Nawar Titnawar, that the light in me sees the light in you, that our region of that part of the world has so much light and so much power in that light of community. And we're in the power of the olive tree and the roots that extend out. And all of us are a part of this system, that we have to remember bugs are also attracted to light. And the more we uplift our light, the more we are going to see a suppression of that. And so those of us in the diaspora, I say, yes, we could feel their pain. It's like you could feel it in your nervous system because we're indigenous people tied to these roots. Yet what happens with the tree and the roots, that when one root doesn't get enough nourishment, the other roots provide that nourishment. And so for those of us in the diaspora, I say we need to continue to hold the light in our wellness so that we can nourish our people abroad. And I get survival guilt. I understand that. Yet it is in our ability to heal and to raise our light that we can continue to nourish our people abroad. That if we fall apart when they are in their suffering of war, we are not helping them. And so can we allow ourselves the emotional to obtain tools to continue the emotional strength so we can uplift and rebuild our communities back home. And that's where I really want us to impart upon ourselves in the diaspora to say the more we can have the luxury and the privilege, yes, we do. So let us work together to really strengthen ourselves, because they need us. They need us to nourish them. So let us be the light that the world is trying to suppress in them and not allow ourselves to be suppressed. Oh, amazing. Yes. Mhm.
By it. Don't even go in there. But if people just take a glimpse of us underneath those thick black covering, they'll find that we are still rich of all these things, and just we need somebody to help us to lift that veil off but you know, and just know us for who we are. But that sometimes, unfortunately, threatening to others, because they know that if they gave us the opportunity to do so, we are going to be so impactful and so inspiring to a lot of people in a lot of places around the world.
So 100%. And let's loop it back to the beginning of your questions around displacement trauma, that when we don't see ourselves, and if we don't lift the veil of our own pain, if we cannot see our own pain, how are others going to see us? And so it does begin with us to be able to, again, gently, slowly, intentionally be able to look deeper within what has happened to us, so that so that we can shift and let the world know, yeah, we are in pain. We are in pain. But if we don't recognize that in ourselves, we stay stoic, strong, and they just think, oh, let's just keep bombing these people. let's just keep destroying them because they just keep rising up. And it's to say, in acknowledging our own humanity and acknowledging our own pain, that is the very thing that may shift. And I think that's what the younger generation is really pushing and saying, can we look at this? That's the outdated, that's the upgrading we need.
No, I agree with you. I never thought about it that way because we make it look like easy. We make it look like, oh, they can take it. Just go at them again. They can take it. They heal. They recover. They come back strong. You can do it to them, over and over again. And it is really sad, but I hope the new generation just, makes a difference with the help of people like you. And I hope that you teach him how to trust the process. It is a process that you have to go through in order to change what we need to change. So, just the last thing, how people can find you. How can we find you?
Okay. So, first you can go to my website and it's www.tiffany, Tiffany, TOTAHMFT.com. So you can find me there. You can find me on all the social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, same thing, Tiffany Totah, MFT. And every Wednesday, it's Wadih Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific time. I do mental health and wellness live. So I pick a topic. So we just kicked off our men's series last week, which is amazing, talking about Arab men and their strengths and how we can support them. And I talk about anxiety, double life, so many, and you can find all that content, for free on my YouTube, and feel free to take a look. But that's where people can find me, is through my website, through the social media, and then you could see me live every Wednesday.
That's amazing. Now I know because I will follow you. So keep an eye out. And thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope this is just the beginning of a long-term relationship, and that you would come on and we dig a little bit deeper on specific topics and some of the issues or the challenges you actually address on social media. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate it. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. It's been wonderful just being with you.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. So we have reached the end of our hour. As a reminder, these episodes are uploaded weekly on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube by the Mindset Mastery Moments. If you have enjoyed this, please like, share, and hit the notification bell. That way you won't miss any episode, and it's free. This community is sponsored by humanity and supported by everyday people stories. So please find us, join us, support us, and as always, be kind to humanity. Thank you for watching and listening. Hope to see you next time. This is Slava the Jordanian.